There we go. We're live. Episode, Jesus Christ, what is it? Oh, 52. This Life in Tech. I'm Jason.
I'm Dan. You all know Vader.
I got my new retro 80s chroma key green screen running, finally.
You almost look like you're in Tron.
Yeah, man. Well, I don't know about you, man, but there's not a lot that I remember fondly from the 80s, but the music, particularly like in the original NES video games, the 8-bit retro music, or even the Super Nintendo in the 90s, man.
Right.
Yeah, I just like the F-Zero racing game. That's the one I always remember. But man, it seems to be coming back, synth wave and shit like that. So I thought, screw it, I'll throw it up and see what happens. And now I don't have to worry about people complaining to one of us about the shit I put on my shelves behind me.
Yeah. Hey, it hasn't tweeted out yet, by the way.
Oh, it hasn't? Let me see. It should go.
Yeah, I know.
I'll check it.
Right around now is when I would.
You want to start with? I thought we'd talk about the UFC a little bit. Maybe we'll start with that and just get it out of the way.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about our two big things, which is I was really interested in your conversation and this broader concept of thin client versus thick client and centralized processing. And then we should talk about perceived identity versus assertion of identity.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's something you and I have been talking about for actually all these things we've been talking about for years, but even more so. I'm just I'll get it out of the way. Part of my aspect with the UFC, without Conor McGregor, I'm really not that interested right now. There's no one that's on the roster that I get excited to go and watch right now.
No,
Cyborg's a great fighter. She, no issues, but there's really no hype about her to me that gets me excited. I was excited about Ronda Rousey when she was there in the beginning. I mean, it was all right. There's something that is different. The Diaz brothers, yeah, I enjoy. Where's the Chuck Liddells? Where's Randy Couture? Even the Huntington Beach bad boy Tito Ortiz. Where are those kind of characters that can just move the needle? I don't see any on the roster today.
Well, even going back to like Chuck Liddell, which was, I think, Chuck and Tito and Randy Couture, and I mean a couple lesser people to varying degrees. I mean, even Andrei Arlovsky's first run, which was a fluke, right? They didn't have any stars, and everybody else was out, and Tito wouldn't fight and all that shit, so they just stuck him in. But I mean, that guy had a horrible record when he started. But anyway, they all had a narrative that we could buy into, and I think that's what people want when they want to view sports. I mean, I don't think anybody really gives a shit about the sport itself. Any sport. I mean, look at the Super Bowl. I don't think anybody really cares about how the ball moves down the field. They care about the narrative of their team that they identify with winning. That's my perception. And the UFC is just like that because it's a sport. And I mean, yeah, that's the problem. I mean, I don't think anybody cares about Cyborg's narrative because she doesn't really have one.
She's she's very respectful. Before, after, she doesn't get into the trash talking. Hey, as a martial artist, yeah, no issues. But she doesn't have that charisma that makes me want to drop, whatever amount of money. Because even if I didn't necessarily in the beginning, that the second run of the UFC when they had the Ultimate Fighter, the very first Ultimate Fighter. Hey, I would go to the bar, any sports bar, and spend $40, drink some beer, and watch the fight.
Yeah, well, and I think we see this. We see the same thing professionally. The people that get quote unquote scene famous are the people that have a narrative, not necessarily the people that are the most skilled at what they're shelling.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not anything that is. I mean, even when GSP was first, going on, Matt Hughes, there was something there.
Yeah, they had narratives, they had stories, and part of it was they had things, and part of it was the UFC developed them, and part of it was they, played characters, if you will. Not that I think Conor McGregor's not like that in real life. I mean, sure, he's putting on a persona, but it's an amplified version of him. But yeah, that sells tickets, man, and people want to be entertained by that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very funny because people talked about me because like at Thanksgiving I had a particular friend over, and he was going, man, I really wish that this food would have turned out bad, so I could have gone into work on Monday and told everyone you were bad at something. And I said, this is the problem. He's like, what's that? I said, count yourself lucky that no one expects greatness from you. Everyone is looking at me to fail, and they're just waiting. And so this technical burden just keeps on piling up, and I just keep winning. But no one thinks that way of you. And he's like, I can't believe you just said that.
Yeah, but it's true. And so, but at the same time, what people fail to realize, I mean, this is kind of going off the rails a little bit, but I think it's a salient point. People don't realize that you become what you want to be. You know what I mean? And if you want to be something, and if you start acting like that's something that you've envisioned for yourself, you'll get there as long as you make good decisions along the way. So if all you throw out is negativity, and you spend the majority of your time trolling, ripping people down, I mean, there's something to the psychological aspect of you're doing that so that you can build yourself up without having to actually build anything. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And of course you're never going to get anywhere. And so having that mindset of, well, I wish this sucks so I could complain about it. I mean, what the fuck is wrong? Well, I mean, I know what's wrong with you, but that's the question everybody should be asking is, why the fuck do we let these people in our tribe?
Yeah, I know. Here's a funnier part. So 2 of these guys that now work directly for me work directly for someone else, my boss. And they didn't perform too well directly under him. So I got to joke around and say with my boss, because I have a great relationship with him, and it's great. I said, this is great because under your direct supervision, they sucked, but under mine, they were voted by all of our peers as the top performers. So this is like a double great for me. Under you, they sucked. Under me, they were great.
Right, and now they no longer suck. So
right, I was like, but people a lot of times don't get that character of Conor McGregor, or even the character that I'm playing. I say a lot of these things because that's what I'm using for my motivation to keep on top, to not looking to fail. Because if I think about in the event that I fail, I've failed many times, but I just get right back up. I mean, You're only as good as the next thing you do. And if the next thing I do, I failed, well, that was only a point in time. The next time I'm not going to fail. But I do these things to motivate myself, because the amount of, harassment I'll take, which is well deserved. I'm fine. Hey, I'm like Ric Flair. If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. I may not be the 4-time winner of the Capital Technology University Researcher of the Year, but I enjoy that. Conor McGregor does the same thing. Think about it. When he lost to Nate Diaz, he was humble, and then he was like, let's go again. Right away.
Yeah, well, and redo it the same way. I mean, he probably had the stature to make that fight at 155, but he said, no, we did it the first time at 170. Let's do it again at 170, and let's see if I can make the necessary adjustments. And that's the thing. I mean, and the 4-time research award thing actually is an interesting example, because the first year I worked there, I didn't get it. And I sat in that crowd thinking, well, what did I not do correctly that I'm not the one getting called up on that stage, because that ain't happening next year. And then once I figured that formula out for the next year, now let's just keep adding to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what Conor McGregor does. He talks that because it also is a part of him, getting motivated. I mean, Michael Jordan is, I don't think there's an argument, best basketball player to ever live. So when you're that good, you have to find something to motivate yourself, because you're like, look, I'm already good. I don't want to play down to my competition. I want to destroy my competition. So you have to always find something. Conor McGregor, same way. For me, same way. I need to find that motivation. Otherwise, I get bored and I go to do something else.
Yeah, well, and that's why I think there's a difference between one of my favorite, not that I'm a big basketball fan necessarily, but I think it's an interesting mechanical sport.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've talked about. I know what you're going to say.
My favorite one is when Larry Bird walked into the locker room for the 3-point competition and said, okay, which one of you fuckers are coming in second?
Yeah.
Well, and so there's a big difference between that attitude, which is confidence, and also trying to instill competition and raise your competitors up right? So everybody gets better versus just throwing stones and tearing people down without having done anything yourself or even attempting to do anything, which is just bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, and that happens all the time. I mean, it's like, I guess it's probably a good transition because it's the same cat that keeps bringing up, different things in some way or form. I guess we'll go into the identity thing real quick.
Sure.
This cat, continues to, keep putting out this stuff about it does not matter what your security systems are. If you can't guarantee presence, then you failed. There's no technology out there today that I'm aware of that can guarantee presence. It's all a mathematical assumption that you are who you say you are. Now, for those that don't get this because they're going to think like, two-factor authentication. Well, we have multi-factor authentication. That is still some type of middleware that is saying to the system that I am Dan Ford or I'm Jason Pittman or I'm, Alice or Bob or whatever. Even if I go, well, there's an access badge. Can I not take that access badge? Can I not duplicate that access badge? Or if they go, well, yeah, but you've got your cell phone with you and that's got, GPS on it. It's got location services. You think I can't make this look like I'm somewhere else?
Well, in the best example of that, when you start talking about direct assertions of biological identity, people come back with the biometric thing, especially because it has the word bio or the prefix bio in it, or the root, I should say. Well, why do you think you can take a gummy bear and put it on a fingerprint sensor and replay that fingerprint? It's not because it's a flaw in the fingerprint. It's because that assertion isn't direct. It's still indirect because you have a computational algorithm running that takes that input, converts it into something, checks it, and then returns a result. And that's the exact same process that happens in every form of authentication we've had for the last century.
Yeah, forever.
Right. I mean, even down to like a shibboleth where, like the classic example in the World War II movies is thunder and what the fuck ever the response is, right? That's anybody can know that word. And in fact, that happened in World War II, right?
Yeah.
Thunder and lightning or some whatever shibboleth they use. Yeah. Even in a case where you can recognize somebody's voice, it's still, unless it's another human being processing that or some kind of organic system or biological based system, you still have middleware. Well, and like we were talking about this before, I mean, we've been talking about this for years. That's the problem is, so when it's indirect, it's the indirect middleware that's being attacked. Your password isn't you, so it's not you being attacked. It's actually not the password itself. It's the system architecture that relies on that indirect assertion that's attacked.
Yeah, and that's the key, I think. So for those that don't really understand what we're really talking about, this is the direct assertion of identity versus indirect assertion of identity. All of our advancements in identity and access management have been in improving indirect assertions of identity. A direct assertion, as far as I'm aware, still does not exist today. I know there's a lot of research going on about it, but I guess when we first started talking about this in 2010, this is when we were going through the doctorate together, we were thinking it was going to be 15 to 20 years away. So that would be 2025, 2030. You still think we still think that timeline or further?
Well, and so unless anybody thinks differently, in my estimation, AI has nothing to do with this. That's not going to solve the problem. What you need is
it's still interpretation.
Right. You need a biological computational system, right? So when you start talking about things like not quantum computers, but DNA computers, and then what's hard about it is you need two different pieces. You need but for lack of a better descriptor, so it's not so abstract. If I have a DNA-based computer, I still need a DNA-based key. And there can't be any non-DNA-based intermediary. It has to be directly coupled. Well,
so are we talking more like Star Trek, the Borg, or Star Wars Expanded Universe, the Yuuzhan Vong?
So here, actually, that's a great question, man. And I don't know if you are intentionally leading it this way, but here's the two things I've seen in sci-fi that clued me into this idea. The Matrix and that Bruce Willis movie Surrogates. So when you look at how the organic humans interfaced with those virtual worlds, it was direct. There was no indirect computational system brokering authentication. They were just connected to it and then there present in some type of avatar form. And now neither of those movies or universes in the Matrix is much more developed ever deal with how that happens. But I think it stands to reason. Like the Matrix is a great example. I mean, the Matrix knew that Neo was there because he was plugged in the machine world, and the virtual world, which is where the Zion-based humans plugged into to get to him, also knew where he was through that tracer program.
Right.
So I don't know, man. To me, there was hints of what it would look like, and I don't think we're close to it, man. And I don't think we're close to it because I don't think anybody's really working on it, as far as I know.
Right. I mean, we know that there was some research coming out of was it Cal Poly at one point, or was it up at UC Irvine?
I think Irvine.
Irvine, yeah. Yeah, that's the part that I think we're further away now, mainly because, like you said, I don't think anyone's really working on it. I think in many ways we're distracted by a Tesla Roadster being shot into space.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, there is one interesting field that's kind of bubbling up now that may push this issue is human robot teaming. So the idea of pairing a human with a robot to perform some action. And I know, like, for instance, DARPA is really interested in this. How do you take a human being and essentially meld them with a robot? And so whether it's like a buddy cop system, which is a gross or a broad way to look at it, or
not like iRobot, though. I mean, I try to leave Will Smith out of as many of my analogies as I can.
Right. Or some type of like transhumanistic actual convergence of those two things. Well, now you're back to the same issue where, I mean, how does the robot know that I'm the right human? And as a human, how do I know that's the right robot to couple with? And that becomes a serious issue.
Yeah, well, because it comes back down. It's still a mathematical probability that you are who you say you are. You know, that's all what it comes down to. Can I fool that system? That's why I brought up the Yuzhan Vong, because it was bio-made and, you know, but still, I don't know, because I didn't really get, it was only one portion of the series of the expanded universe there. And yes, I am a Star Wars geek, but if you make fun of me, Vader will come for you.
You know, actually, that's a really interesting point real quick, man. You're certainly more up on Star Wars universe canon than I am. But it's funny how they never really delve too much into the computational side of sci-fi. It's much more of a space opera in that sense. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where the technology is just there and it's never really dealt with directly or explained directly.
Yeah. And they just, it was much more theater. And then a lot of the sci-fi is like that. I mean, The Matrix does at least a decent job of that, you know, talking about how we're no longer connected. But I think the biggest thing here, that when people start talking about, oh, this is a direct assertion of identity, you always ask, how is that possible? Is there middleware? If not, and I'm not saying that indirect assertions of identity are not getting better or that you should not have something. You should. The more different attributes that we can apply to assure a system that it's really you getting in there, then our money's more protected, our systems are more protected. It's great, but you're still only getting to a certain percentage. How many nines do we want to go in order to say, okay, I'm certainly sure? When I go to sign up for new credit for something, it starts asking me questions that only I should really know the answer to. Well, thankfully, a lot of my, and it's looking at your credit report. So it's going, hey, which one of these vehicles have you owned in the past? Because I had a car loan. Which one of these addresses did you live at in the past? Which one of these mortgages did you have? So on and so forth. Only I should know those things. Should. Anyone that knows that I've, what my car was at the beginning could probably figure it out. A fun game I like to play with the uninitiated friends of mine is ask them their security questions.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's why that
the first dog that you had when you were growing up. What was its name?
Yeah. Well, and so this is something that people confuse too. Is so we can look at like two-factor, right? And that's certainly more robust than single-factor. I mean, I don't know where there's an argument that that's not true. It's demonstrably true, and it's been demonstrably true for quite some time, right? But that doesn't make it a direct assertion. It's still indirect. It just happens to be more robust than a single factor.
Absolutely. And we've been for those that don't think that we've been using two-factor authentication, it's been going on for decades. The ATM card. As long as we've had ATM machines, that you've been using two-factor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had a WoW authenticator for 12 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's straight up two-factor. In fact, originally, before they came out with the app, it was an RSA dongle. I mean, you got the same key fob that you got if you had an RSA system in an enterprise. It was identical. It was just rebranded.
Yep. You know, and that's a good point, because people may wonder, well, why are games coming out like World of Warcraft, Star Wars, The Old Republic? Because they're all economy. The economy inside these games is more valuable and more easily predictable than Bitcoin.
Well, you know, and what's interesting about that is look at it from like Blizzard's perspective, especially after they were picked up by Activision. So now there's the huge public company. Clearly, from a business perspective, and I think this is where understanding business makes sense, because you would just look at it and be like, oh, we should spend money on two-factor and give it to our players. No, why would you do that? What happened was the cost of supporting users without authenticators exceeded what it would take to distribute authenticators, right? So rather, it'd be way more expensive to hire more support staff to take care of all the hacked account issues. So it was much cheaper to just expand the two-factor to basically everybody for free. And actually, they were able to reduce staff because of that, in part. And they didn't completely eliminate the gold selling and the virtual goods and stuff like that. But man, I mean, I played the game when it didn't have that shit, and it was atrocious. And I play it now, and it's demonstrably different.
Oh, and it's great. So, like, you know, I haven't played Star Wars: Old Republic in a little while. Just I haven't had time. But they you know, it's owned by EA.
Mm-hmm.
They've done it right. Oh, they in terms of, there's still people trying to sell you, credits. We're like, oh, you want that? Just give us the money.
Mm-hmm.
So you can buy the credits directly from them. You want to go buy whatever? Go right ahead. So guess they basically said, which is how I feel about, in a lot of ways, legalized marijuana. Hey, why go give it to the dealer when if the government, like in Colorado, has got it right? Stop giving the money over here. I'll take your money.
Yeah.
Because even if it's a little bit more expensive, I've already, this is the best part, which ties right into authentication. It's, you already have extended your trust to them. I don't have to determine whether or not that third party, I can trust them or not. I've already extended my trust, which is a lot of ways authentication, to EA or Activision. So,
yeah, I mean, at its core, it's an abstract of federated identity.
Yeah. Bingo.
Well, and actually, an interesting point, just to wrap that up. I've never thought about this before, but it's interesting how little credit Apple's given for priming society for microtransactions.
Oh yeah.
When they first released iTunes and offered songs for 99 cents or what the fuck ever, you know what I mean? Because Blizzard just released I think it was last week or the week before, their quarterly earnings, and man, they make more off microtransactions than all their games put together.
Yeah, I bet easily. And it's interesting because I know it's slightly off topic, but this is about technology, and not that I'm a huge console fan, because I mean, really, all I really play are sports games on the console. That's just what I like, because I like to get online. I like to play against other kids, basically, and just talk trash to them the entire time. Because I've been playing Madden before they were even born.
Right.
And I didn't play this past one, but then I get bored with it. I go to be the general manager and just start trying to play with the numbers to see if I can put together through an entire simulation, a dynasty, without ever touching a controller, which most of the time I can. But Xbox, they're right now the second, in the console contest between them and Sony with PlayStation. But Twitch, in its first 90 days, 50 million users, fastest than any other technology. And why is that? A lot of it has to do with exclusivity. Anyone remember Apple back in the days? You couldn't get anything unless it came from Apple, right? There is an aspect to that. They didn't go out and get all these publishers like you can find on Xbox or PlayStation. And now Microsoft, and they're a distance number two. It is distant. It's like Sony PlayStation is 3 times bigger than the Xbox. They're talking about Microsoft should go out and buy a video game company to just make it. But then by doing that, if you're only going to make games for the Xbox, then you just completely kill that. So like if they went and bought Bethesda or EA, Activision, whomever, which it's not that Microsoft couldn't, and they have done this in the past. Well, they'll buy something to just kill it. What happens then?
Well, Microsoft has always had this interesting position where they could be much better than they are. But why they never quite get there, I mean, I don't know.
It's interesting. I don't get it. There's certainly, why not just develop your own games? They're big enough. They're certainly large enough that they could do that.
Well, they do have some exclusive titles. I haven't played consoles in a long time, man. But their whole thing was supposed to be, and it seems to be like their phone where it never really took off, is if you buy a Microsoft title on Xbox, you can play it on Windows 10 through the Xbox app.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be cross-platform compatible. But I don't do that because they don't fucking make any games that I would play.
Yeah, right. I'm, for the most part, I still play Minecraft because I just enjoy it. I just think it's fun to do. And, I play... I haven't played any other games really. I'll play like Civilization just because when I'm on a plane, it's kind of difficult, and I don't have to worry about the memory or the graphics really. Just haven't had time as much. This whole being an adult thing kind of sucks. So speaking of those kind of things, we get into it. Our last part of the topic, which has just been this. It irritates me when so-called experts in security say, just go to a Chromebook, you'll solve like all of your problems. It's easy to say when you're the CISO for Facebook or the CISO for Lyft, because you're dealing in an app, which mobile apps are basically just many little browsers, in a way. It's easy to say those kind of things. The challenge that I've got in business is that a lot of applications, for whatever reason, and I tend to believe I know the reason, they're all thick-based clients. They're not browser-based. It's still not for business that's out there. They just keep building upon a technology platform that was easy for them, and they just add more features into it. When you're a large company, like if you are Citibank, Wells Fargo, UBS, Walmart, Exxon, you have enough money that you can go and hire 1,000 developers, keep them on staff, and build whatever you want because you can. A company my size can't. We have to rely on what's already there. And we're not big enough to move the needle, but we're too small to go hire even 100 developers to make what we want. So we get basically a platform that is primarily thick client based, unless it's something bigger players want, like an HR system or expense reporting, things of, a CRM, because anyone out there can use Salesforce. Anyone out there could use Oracle's or NetSuite, which I don't recommend NetSuite. They have gotten better, but I'm not a fan, mainly because they told me their security was absolutely perfect and they were using SSL version 3. And we're not talking about 20 years ago. Just 2 years ago, they were going, we're not changing, and it's SSL version 3. Anyway, I think they've changed it since then. But regardless, if you're that way on security, I just don't really want to deal with you. But anyway, back to this point. So for security experts to say, just go to a Chromebook, that means, I've got 1,400 employees, roughly 1,394 won't be able to work. It's just, it's really easy to sit in your, glass castle, whatever you want to call it, and look down upon everyone and go, just do this. Come down to reality.
Yeah, so when you were talking about this on LinkedIn, I got really curious about it, man, because I've said this before on the podcast. The first real place I worked, which was more or less like a startup. It was a startup within a big company. We ran Citrix Metaframe, and this is back in the day, man.
Yeah,
and so we had a lot of thin client, let's say, terminals distributed throughout the enterprise that just you turned it on and it auto connected to the Metaframe environment and off you went. And that worked, but it worked for the people that only needed the apps we could host in Metaframe, because you couldn't host everything in Metaframe.
Still the same problem today.
Right. And that's the point I was going to make, is as fabulous as, I think, if nothing else, just from an administrative overhead. I mean, for the segment of the user population that used the thin client, we got way less support calls. Well, of course we did, because they didn't have anything really to support other than simple, stupid shit. Everything was in the Metaframe environment.
Yep.
But that was a small percentage of the total population. And most of the things that we ran in Metaframe at that time, we had to seriously hack to get to work. Whether it was like registry fuckery and just all kinds of configuration sorcery, working directly with engineers at vendors to customize stuff. And it took an enormous amount of labor and high-end systems engineering talent.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, even with the massive advances we've had and all the surrounding technology, that concept has not fucking changed in 2 decades. I have a significant part of my user population that cannot be, if to use a modern term, virtualized.
Yep, it's true. So, I'm going through the whole Windows 10 upgrade process. And for those who don't know, you hear Windows 10 and a lot of people go, oh yeah, well, it's Windows 10. No, they have various different tracks. And I've got a major application that won't support 1709, I think is the number it is, the version of Windows 10, until this fall. That would be a year after it was released. The version they do support, Microsoft will not supply security patches as of August of this year, because they're like, hey, just go to the next iteration, the next patch level. So I'm at a dilemma, but I'm not at a dilemma. But there's 2 sides to this. I want to get rid of Windows 7. So just me getting everyone to Windows 10 first. I'll worry about August and September and this fall when I get closer. Right now, I just need Windows 10 because the Windows 7 kernel is broke. So we've got to get it to that point. But I'm always going to have an event like that. And this is where I got to tell my team many times that I think I hate having to use a Will Smith movie, but it's true with Men in Black. Just because I think, not that I don't like Will Smith, I just think this guy's like the golden boy. Basically, everything he does just turns to gold for the most part, except as DJ Jazzy Jeff in The Fresh Prince. But on the other side of that, he should have got rid of Jeff. They say in Men in Black, in that movie, he's going, to the K character. I don't remember the exact thing. He's like, there's an Arkellian cruiser that's up there, and K cuts him off and he goes, there's always a cruiser getting ready to blast us. There's always a death ray. There's always a plague. There's always something that's going to wipe out humanity. Well, folks, there's always going to be an internet-ending event. So if it's always going to happen, then it's never going to happen, because all of them have been wrong in the past. I'm not going to worry about this fall until I get closer to it, because it doesn't matter. If I stay on Windows 7, I'm SOL. If I wait until this fall, so I just need to get it rolled out.
Yeah.
And I want to get to application layering, which is basically desktop virtualization. And when I get to that point, then maybe, because maybe I can limit the amount of people that need to use that thick client for that particular function, and I can start moving them to a different client.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, it's almost a shame, because we don't seem to be able to get away. I should say actually in the opposite direction. We don't seem to be able to get to a point where an operating system and thick applications are disposable, which is what web applications were supposed to do. And again, I'll go back to Microsoft. You know, when Microsoft first started thinking about .NET, and they at that time, remember the Passport system instead of Live, and before that, they had this massive project called Hailstorm.
Yeah,
and that's at least in part, as I always interpreted, what that revolution, if we want to call it the Web 2.0 or the web app part of that revolution, was supposed to bring us, was disposable operating systems and disposable applications. And man, I don't know that we're any closer. In some ways we are. Like I don't use an email thick client. I've said this before, and I haven't used one for several years. So in narrow slices we're there, but in broad slices, I don't know that we're any closer.
I don't think that we are in reality. I wish we were, but I just don't see it.
And we're sure as shit not any closer to interoperability between stacks. I mean, it amazes me, man. It amazes me.
I would agree. It's just not. It's not close. I don't think it's close at all.
No.
We continue to think it is, but even with browser based, I mean, if all of a sudden you're on a Mac and you have Safari still displays things differently than what Chrome and you name it, because the back-end developers are still, they're developing the product based on what they know.
Well, and they, yeah, well, and I would assume, this would be interesting. I don't know if there's any research on this, but I would assume it has to do with just basic human nature. I mean, because there is a published standard for browser engines of how they should interpret and render HTML and CSS. I mean, there's a fucking standard for it. But just like TCP/IP, everybody somewhat has a different implementation of that same standard. And I don't know if that's because of human nature and the developers, or if it's, hey, we want to do something a little different, or if it's just culture. I have no idea which amongst those, and probably more than one it is, but it's still to this day is persistent.
Well, and we just have the same issue that's being repeated. Now it's no longer necessarily, desktop, laptop. What version of Apple iOS are you on? Which version of Android are you on? Oh, well, this works differently on Android than it does Apple. Oh, I'm sorry, on the Apple X, because you have this version of iOS, it works this way, but on the 8S, if they even had an 8S, I don't know if it was just an 8 or not, but you have this version. So it's just the same problem continues to repeat itself.
Just like authentication.
Bingo.
Because I don't know that our systems are demonstrably any different, or certainly not any better. I mean, like authentication, again, we've made progress. I mean, two-factor, I don't think there's any argument that it's more robust than single-factor. But it doesn't mean it doesn't have problems. It's not immune.
And nothing is. But it's easy. Yes, everyone, in the event chance that they get, they should always use at least two factors of authentication. Don't misinterpret that. But it's easy for all of these people that are sitting up on their soapbox to tell us, well, if you were just doing that, if you were just doing this, you wouldn't have happened. Yeah, the reason why everyone wants to go to a Google Chromebook, it's a slick little thing. There's not that many of them, so there's no reason to develop exploits for them. The bad actors out there, they're just like the people making products today. They want to go after whatever the market share is. You move the market share to Chromebooks, there will be malware and exploits all over a Chromebook.
Well, and that's one of the things that's always bugged me. This is the last thing I think I have to say about this topic, at least for now. One of the things that's always bugged me the most about the cyber community, the security community, is this propensity to act like little children and pretend that you're field scientists, and that as a field scientist, when you discover something new, you have first right to name it, and you can name it pretty much anything you want. Genus, species, so forth and so on, right? And our field has this, but in a very amateurish way, where rather than actually going out into the field as a real field scientist would and actually doing the hard work to find something new so that you can name it, it's easier to repackage something that's old and give it a new name and act as if it's new. So this concept of perceived identity is it's nonsense. It's complete made up bullshit. Right? I mean, it's not new, and that's demonstrable through the lack of new technology. What do you mean perceived identity? You're not perceiving shit.
Yeah.
Man, it gets me fired up, dude. God damn it.
Well, that's great because I had this. So speaking of that, because this is another thing, everyone wants the CISOs of the organization to report to the CEO. And I think that's a huge, huge mistake. The reason why they want to is because they want to solve the symptoms and not the problem, right? The symptoms is, oh, well, security's not getting to the board. So you think the CEO is going to be able to fix that? Because the CEO doesn't know. The CEO has zero idea as to who is telling the truth, the CIO or the CISO, right? The CISO still, to me, needs to report to the CIO. You just need a CIO that's going to take risk appropriately. I'm not saying the CISO should not have a report that goes to the board and that it's unfiltered. That's not what I'm saying. But anyway, this one cat on LinkedIn, because he said, I'm like, look, if the CISO can't get his peers or her peers in an organization to make changes, then is that really the type of CISO you want, that they can't influence the organization? His response was, well, by your headline, you being a CTO, you clearly don't understand the problem. And I was like, how typical for you to just look at the headlines.
Yeah.
How typical. You have no idea, because if you had looked a little bit at my LinkedIn profile, you would have seen, yeah, I switched over to a CTO because if I want to affect real cybersecurity change, I can do it as a technologist. I'm not going to do it as a CISO.
No.
I'm going to put the right technology at the most secure I possibly can, that also has the right people in place, that has a development plan in order to increase the security posture day over day. But I wouldn't expect a CISO to really understand that, because they still have their feelings hurt because they don't feel like mommy and daddy are paying enough attention to them because there's a different baby that's there. Well, how about you grow up and start learning how to be a technology professional?
And that's exactly what happens. I think that's a great analogy, man. And you've seen it a million times, and so have I. Anytime you have a wide instead of narrow hierarchy, especially with technology, what you're doing is you're creating squabbling siblings.
Yeah.
Right? Because now those two officers have a perception, because they have an equal reporting structure up, that somehow they have equal voice. And when they're not necessarily as individuals trying to achieve the same goals. And that's a fucking problem. You've seen it a million times, so have I. Whereas if you have a unified, narrow hierarchy, not that it can't branch out as it goes down, naturally it will, but you don't have that high level redundancy that's unnecessary. Everybody's on the same page and moving towards the same goal. And as long as everybody's competent, I agree that's, I think, not only the natural way it should be, but the best way it should be.
Yep. And I've been a CISO, and I enjoyed it, but as a CISO, I don't get to affect change. I can't put out the best product. I only get to go, the product people are going to make a product decision, whether it's for a company making a product or services or whatever. They're going to pick the thing that's going to best get them market share. And then security's got to come in and go, I need to bolt this on, bolt this on, bolt this on, bolt this on. They forget about user experience, because you have to have a good balance. Yes, we need security, but we need to make the product that is going to get us the most market share and be the most secure we possibly can without preventing us from getting market share. And it can be done. We were doing this at Silent Circle. We had a great secure product. We had a different challenge in that business folks didn't understand business, which they were supposed to, which was really kind of key, because they kept telling us, you don't understand business. I'm like, clearly you don't either, because you're not getting sales in the door. But anyway, I'm going, if you can't get this to happen. So I wanted out of the CISO world. And the reason for that is because then I can make the right product decisions that are going to do that and be secure. But then also I can go and talk to the CISO and go, and we can start consulting, because I know how that has to be. But do I want to put, in a lot of ways, the CISO in front of the board? No. And the reason being, they don't know how to talk to the board. They don't know how to talk to investors. They don't know how to talk to And yes, okay, George Kurtz and Dmitry Alperovich and people like that, they're different. You're talking about, you know, 1 in a million type personalities that understand business and marketing and how to talk to boards and get money. Those are the people from CrowdStrike. That's a completely different animal. There are more people that are a CISO than there are Dimitri's and George Kurtz's of the world, by far. So I don't argue this, you know, the specifics when we know the general populace, they can't do it. What do? It's the same thing we've talked about every single time. You disagree with them, they immediately attack something. That's it. They don't want to engage in a debate. It's about that. So I just say to them, and you're, you know, how typical for someone in your field, because I don't want to be a part of their field, basically, because I find them to be closed off, ignorant to how business really needs to work. So I just say how typical, and you're the exact reason why a CISO will not report to the CEO.
Well, and you know, to tie that up,
act like you've been there before.
You're right. And to tie that up, I mean, you know, we've talked about this before many times. And for a long time, the cliche from security people has been security sucks because it has to be bolted on after the fact. Well, how can you be in a different position if you insist on being outside of the mainstream technology in the business? So if you don't want it bolted on, stop insisting to be in a silo. Stop calling yourself something that you're not. You're a technologist. You just happen to have a different focus on that technology, and that's fine. But when you insist on being treated differently and acting differently, which is external to the main business process, then why does it shock you that it's bolted on? Of course it is, because you're outside of it. You're not inside of it. Because
most of these CISOs just went and got their CISSP, their CCISO, or something along those lines, and they think they know how to run a security program. By the way, those are just policy monkeys. That's it. They don't even write the policy. They go and buy the policies, search, find, replace, and put in your company name, and hey, I've got you governance. I've got you policy. You bought it. You didn't buy it.
Hey, don't knock that, man. I've actually made a non-trivial amount of money just writing policies for people like that.
Yeah.
Because they can't even find the templates themselves.
I'm not saying that I've done that, but of course. But don't say then you know how to be a CISO.
Right.
Because you don't.
Well, and don't complain that you have to bolt your stuff on after the fact. Of course you do, because you insist on being outside of it.
Because they can't talk to. I mean, imagine John Callis, who, you know, we've both worked with, and I think the world of him. He is not a CISO. Who's going to argue security with him?
Right.
Who in their right mind? I mean, well, we did. We convinced him to do a bug bounty program. You're welcome, Silent Circle, and everyone else that uses an Android product, because we did. John Callis wasn't for it, but we convinced him. Hey, how many other people can say they've won a debate with John Callis?
Yeah, right.
Maybe it did take the two of us because, well, John Callis is a smart cat and he's seen a lot more than what we've seen. So, you know.
But we all agreed. And see the thing, and the why that's actually a good example is because nobody acted in a certain role other than I'm a technologist and I think this is the best course of action for the business. And that's what all three of us argued.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the two of us already agreed.
Healthy debate. You're going to have a secure product, but guess what? If the CISO who does not, you know, is not one of my peers, guess what I'm going to say to that person when they want to come into this? Sorry, good luck. I don't have to listen to you.
Well, and here's the final evidence I'll present for this, man. And people should really think about this. So when you and I were growing up in technology, there was no security department. There was no CISO. That shit didn't exist.
Yeah, no, it didn't.
And if anybody did it, it's because you had a personal hobby interest in it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I challenge one of our viewers to demonstrate how overall there has been a quantifiable reduction in either or risk or compromises since the inflation of the security industry. And I would argue that it's the exact opposite. As the security industry has proliferated, so have the compromises, the breaches, the risk It's not going the way that everybody argued it would by proliferating security verticals.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that would be a tough one, because the reason why I say it's a tough argument is it just like the argument of how many people have been in. This is a horrible analogy, so to speak, but it's somewhat true. Do we have more people who are abducting children today, or meaning, do we have the same amount of sick people in the world today, or is it just that more people are aware of it? I don't know if the security issue that we have is any different, or there's any more or less breaches, or are we just more aware of it?
And that, I don't think that's why I think you can't count things like Yahoo. Or fucking, did you read the recent Equifax news where it was way more data stolen than they reported after Trump's administration said they would drop the investigation? Naturally. You have to discount that stuff right off the top, but there's ways to quantify it. Like, I've worked on research with a team of students on quantifying the inflation of buffer overflows in open source software. And I can tell you, man, as much as people think that there's better security, there's not. It's actually directly inverse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because who's checking it? You wait. I mean, anyway, yeah, I don't believe that, again, that this comes back down to me in this case, that when you have a good CIO, yeah, you want someone that the CISO should be advising, but you know everything that's going on when you report to the CIO at that point. If you report somewhere else, you think the CIO, hey, in big companies, it's about corporate politics at that point. The CIO is not going to be so willing to share. And I will say, if I'm the CIO, good luck with the CISO arguing with me outside of my organization to determine who is right. The CEO is not going to know who's right.
Right, exactly.
Or the chief operating officer, if that's who we report to. As long as we don't report to the CFO, my gosh. That would
yeah. No.
Anyway, I'm done on that topic. Basically, when I at this particular point, whenever someone starts doing those kind of things on LinkedIn, I said this last time, I just unfollow you and block you. Because if you don't want to have the debate and you just want to get into this whole aspect of, you're going to immediately just attack, and clearly you're what's wrong with the industry. Because I'm more than willing to have the debate. Hey, come on the show. Let's have the debate. I'm not saying that I'm always right. I'm just saying there's more than one way to put out a proper product. And well,
and none of them rest on perceived identity.
Yeah, it's not with perceived identity. It's not with New Coke. It's not with Coke Classic.
I know, man. If I wanted to engage in unnecessary nonsense, I'll just go talk to my 3-year-old, because at least it's half entertaining.
Yeah, that's true. Or my dog.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of cute when she calls me a stinker. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I'll take that abuse because it's kind of cute.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah, not knowing she's 16.
Yeah. Well, because I don't think she'll be using the word stinker anymore, but
yeah.
It'll be a different
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man, that's episode 52, dude.
Yep, in the bag. All right, friends. Guess we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, and if you want to debate a topic, have a civil discourse, send us a tweet. We'll get you on the show. If you like the retro 80s background, let me know. If you want something different, I can pop it right in.
I need to come. Maybe I can get Darth Vader fighting Luke Skywalker in my background next time.
Oh shit! Oh, I'm gonna try that, man.
Yeah. Darth Vader should not have worried about him being his son, and he should have just crushed him. I was so disappointed. If I was writing it, that's what I would have done.
Yeah, man. I don't get me started.
Yeah. All right.
Later, everybody. Have a good one.
Peace.
Bye.